Joining us now, Curtis Ellis, my comrade in arms. Been fighting the battles with Curtis for, I don't know, years. It's like the John and Curtis show. Senior policy advisor at American First Policies now. That is the political action committee of the Donald J. Trump effort and kind of the sanctioned one. There's a couple others out there, but that's the biggie. And he's a senior policy advisor. He also served as a senior advisor to the Trump campaign in 2015 and 16. And prior to that was the executive director of the American Jobs Alliance, of which now I'm the executive director, and he's the chairman. So we got a promotion. It's always good to have him on. And by the way, he didn't send any emails to Russians as part of the Trump campaign. So he's not under investigation by Robert Mueller. Curtis Ellis, great to have you, man.
Very good. Great to be back with you, John.
Okay, so we're going to get to taxes because that's been delayed a day. It's going to come out tomorrow, the Trump tax plan. And I know you're a policy advisor with American First Policies. But tell us your thoughts right now on the Mueller investigation, the indictments, George Papadopoulos. Look, you were in Trump Tower as a senior advisor in communications for months and months and months.
Right.
Did you ever see this guy, Papadopoulos? I didn't.
Never saw him. Never heard his name mentioned. And by the way, I never saw any Russians either. But I never saw Papadopoulos. One day now, I have to. This is as close as I got to hearing Papadopoulos. One night, they used to cater dinner because we were working there at all times, and so to keep people's noses to the grindstone, they would bring in food, right? So you couldn't go out. I mean, you could if you really wanted to. If you were foolish enough and you wanted to spend your own money and go out and buy dinner in Midtown Manhattan, which will cost you a king's ransom, you could do that. But in order to keep people's noses to the grindstone, they would cater the food. They would bring in dinner every night in the last months of the campaign. On a couple of occasions, and we really looked forward to this, they would cater food. The catered dinner would be from a Greek restaurant. So we'd have kebabs, lamb on skewers and tzatziki and spanakopita. Yeah. And that's as close as I got to ever hearing it. I never heard the name Papadopoulos. So maybe the guy who came in and dropped the food off, maybe his name was Papadopoulos, because it's a very common Greek name.
It's a Greek name. That's about as close as he got. Look, George Papadopoulos had no influence in the Trump campaign. I was in Trump Tower many times. I never saw him there. I was in at the end, as you know, the final days, doing my show there. I never heard of the guy. I checked into it a little bit. He was an advisor to the Ben Carson campaign. Barry Bennett was the campaign manager. Carson drops out of the race. Carson backs Trump. The Trump campaign hires Barry Bennett on their staff, along with Ed Brookover, both with the Carson campaign. And Barry Bennett brought over a Papadopoulos as a volunteer. That's it. End of story. Yeah. Nothing. Zero.
Yeah, and I got news. I got news for everybody here. It's rather common for people on campaigns to make promises and try to curry favor with higher ups by saying they can deliver things that they can't deliver, right? And they get any shred of information, any shred of a thin thread. They'll try to hang the Empire State Building on this thin thread. So this guy's out there sending emails, apparently saying he can connect the campaign with the King of Jordan, the Prince of Saudi Arabia, and the President of Russia. It's like, good luck with that, but whatever.
Sure. Well, look, the bottom line is,
never heard of the guy, never met him, never saw him.
He was 30 years old. He was a volunteer, and he was trying to make a name for himself and present himself as some kind of a bigwig with all these connections. He didn't have any, and nobody paid any attention to anything he said. That's the bottom line.
And my advice to any prosecutor or anybody else is that old adage, beware of Greeks bearing gifts.
Curtis Ellis, why did it take a special counsel and tens of millions of dollars to indict a run-of-the-mill political operative for evading taxes that they've been working on since apparently 2015 or earlier. Why did it take a special counsel for this? How come he didn't get indicted earlier by the FBI?
Well, 2006, right? According to this
2006.
This funny money scheme, this alleged funny money scheme, has been going on since 2006. So they had to. What it shows is just how far afield these special counsels go, and the only thing he can hang his hat on now is. I just can't imagine that sitting here in Washington, D.C., where every other person that you run into who's wearing a nice suit is working for a foreign government and receiving very hefty paychecks from doing it. I imagine there's more than a few people that have money stashed away in other bank accounts. Now, maybe the swamp creatures protect each other, and so they don't go looking under rocks trying to find out who's hiding money in the Seychelles. But I imagine there's a few people doing this. As he said, this one fellow who was indicted has a reputation for doing business with kind of smarmy dictators. And, you raise a good question. Why did it take a special prosecutor to find him, to uncover this scheme that's been going on for 10 years? But it also raises the other question, which is what the special prosecutors just seem to have an open-ended mandate to just go after everything. I mean, maybe we're going to find out that this guy Papadopoulos or somebody else on the campaign, left a bad tip for a waitress at the lunch counter 15 years ago. I mean, they apparently have the prosecutor has license to talk to anybody about anything who has ever been somehow 6 degrees of separation connected to the Trump campaign. That's a lot of people.
Well, it's getting ridiculous. We're with Curtis Ellis, Senior Policy Advisor, America First Policies, also was a Senior Policy Advisor to the Trump campaign. And I'm also on the transition team, and he was a real Trump advisor, not like George Papadopoulos, who nobody ever heard of, who this guy is or care. Now, here's my question to you, Curtis Ellis. This is starting to feel to me like a politically motivated operation to justify the very existence of the special prosecutor, the special counsel, because they have nothing. Tell me I'm wrong.
It certainly feels that way. Today, by the way, it's interesting we're talking about this today because today what we're going to have and what we saw yesterday, we have Google and Facebook and all the tech giants testifying on Capitol Hill. And yesterday they were testifying about Russian ads that were played on Facebook, as though this is some kind of shocking, horrifying, unbelievable development. Well, I'll tell you what. Before there was Facebook and before there was Google and before there was the Internet, there was a thing called shortwave radio, right? And heaven forbid, Americans were able to tune into Radio Moscow at the height of the Cold War, and you could hear broadcasts of the Moscow Party line. The Soviet Communist Party was able to feed information directly into the brains of Americans via radio. Oh my gosh, somehow America survived that. And now we are shocked, just shocked to hear that Russians are trying to plant information into the American society, into the ears and the brains of Americans. And now they're using Facebook to do it. And they're using ads on internet, and they've got the RT cable network, and this is somehow undermining our democracy. Folks, this is nothing new. We've always known that the Russians try to, the Russians and the Chinese and the Brits and the French and everybody else, they try to tell us what they're thinking, and they try to convince us and persuade us of the virtues of their system. So what's really crazy about this whole thing, when you look at even what the special counsel has been charged with looking into, is ties between, possible collusion between the campaign and Russian attempts to influence the campaign. And all we hear about is this person has Kremlin links, or that person has ties to Russia.
Mm-hmm.
Folks, what did the Obama administration push for 8 years? They tried to cram down our throats the idea that globalization is good and that we're part of a global community and a global economy and we're all global citizens and this is hunky-dory and nationalism is bad. So on the one hand, nationalism is bad, and any attempts to maintain a national identity and a distinct national identity and give prerogatives to citizens above others is somehow akin to Nazism. On the one hand, they're telling us that, but then on the other hand, they're telling us, oh my gosh, we've got these foreign people trying to influence our country. You can't have it both ways, folks. If we're going to live in a globalized society where everybody's got links to everybody else, you can't jump up and down and scream collusion, 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 because somebody once got an email from somebody else who claimed to have a connection or an audience with somebody from another country. I mean, it's just bizarre. It's just completely, it just shows this whole thing is politicized. This whole thing is just, they're trying to use anything to take down Donald Trump and nullify the results of an election because they didn't like the outcome.
Well, that seems to be the bottom line, Curtis Ellis, there's no question. And when you look at Russian interference in U.S. elections, does anybody remember that there was a time, I know when I was growing up in the late 60s and the 70s, where they ran a Communist Party candidate for president on the Communist Party USA line, and that candidate was, remember his name? Gus Hall. Gus Hall. Gus Hall was funded by the Soviets. And, I mean,
right.
They funded his campaign.
He said, I take orders from Moscow.
Right. That's what he said.
That's what he said.
Right. They funded his campaign. All of his signs, all of his stickers, before that, back then it was in the 70s, there was no internet. But to get the signatures to get on the ballot, the Soviets funded that. And he was the Communist USA Party for president for probably 3 times.
Yeah. And you had, at that time, communism in America was like Baskin and Robbins. There were 36 different flavors of it. And Gus Hall was proudly the Moscow party line candidate communist. You had the STS, you had the Black Panthers, you had the White Panthers, you had the Pink Panthers, you had everything else. They were all Marxist-Leninists. You had the Maoists, you had the Meowists.
You had the SWP, the Socialist Workers Party, that was on the ballot all over the Northeast. Right. They ran a candidate for president. But Gus Hall, that's right. But Gus Hall,
Party, you had all kinds of wackadoodles. And Gus Hall was proudly the Moscow communist flavor communist.
That's right, exactly. So this whole thing is so asinine. I'm out of time for this segment. This is the John Fredericks Radio Network. I want to thank Curtis Ellis for being with us, the Senior Policy Advisor of America First Policies.